Hi y'all, my name is Nattalya Brown. I am 21, almost 22 years old, and I was born to an abandoned 8-year-old and a drug addict, which I'll get into a little bit more in just a moment. So I am a hetero woman, so I fall into the, gender norms and, yeah. So my mom had me at 21 and my dad was, I believe, 25 or so. I am 21 and I could not imagine dealing with anyone other than myself. I don't know how she did it. I can't even deal with kids right now at the moment. My mom was abandoned at 8, which is why I say I was, born to an abandoned 8-year-old and an addict, because my dad was not only an alcoholic but a drug addict. And I just wanted to highlight these two things as a way to kind of explain, I wasn't going into this like super well-rounded family, right? I had a family that had their own baggage that was unfortunately gonna be put onto me because of the way that life works. Even if your parents do work through their traumas, I think sometimes that's still reflected on you as their child. And so with that being said, I wasn't even born when my dad left. He left my mom when she was 3 months pregnant. But he really fell off the face of the earth when I was 3 or 4. And he also did that to my biological brother. And growing up, my mom always said that he just couldn't love himself, so, I'm protecting you from him not being able to love you. And, when you're little, 6, 7, you don't understand that. Like, why wouldn't you love me? What is this idea of loving myself? And it wasn't until recently that, like the last few years, that I acknowledged this as being abandonment. Because, so often you go through things and you experience certain feelings, but you never can put a name to it in a way in which you can explain it to other people, if that makes like sense. Like, I always looked at it, I have daddy issues, whatever, like, but it's interesting now looking back and kind of beginning to heal from that. So I would have to say when I was 4 or 5, I kind of embedded a message. This isn't one that I can recall anyone said to me, but basically a feeling of not being wanted, a feeling of worthlessness. Again, not because that's something that people are saying to me or embedding in me, but more of the fact that my dad wasn't around and I really didn't, understand what that meant. Why would you? As far as I'm concerned, I should have a mom, a dad, and a sibling, right? Because usually there's 2 kids. And I think that initial abandonment really reflected how, and still is very reflective of how I treat my relationships now, especially with my male counterparts, which can be difficult. It can be draining. I think that more than ever, I just want to fill that void, not because I want a particular person for being them, but more because when I was younger, it made me feel like, maybe this is a man that, or a boy, you know, little nuts when we're young, but this person wants me, and they won't leave. Like, obviously I know they're gonna leave, but like, I wasn't giving them a reason. I was always very submissive, and I can still be that way, not as much, but submissive in the sense where, like, I did for people that don't always return that. Not that you always expect something in return, but just having those people that that if you were in the same position, that they would be there for you. And I think that I am a people pleaser, because of this, because maybe if I don't give you a reason to want to leave me, why would you leave? And even if you did leave, I'll internalize it and think of 1,000,001 reasons why it was my fault as to why you left me. So when I was like 10 is when I was officially diagnosed with anxiety. Again, looking back on my childhood, my great-grandmother was a really big contributor. Not that she was intentionally trying to make me have anxiety, but I think she had a lot of her own anxieties. And when you're like 4, when you're like 3, and someone's like telling you some, not explicit, but like just things you don't understand, give some background. This part of my family, they're Trinidadian, they're West Indian, so how like elders can kind of stir up the pot a little. And growing up, my grandmother would always openly have conversations about not allowing people to touch me and things like that. And I only use that as an example because I think her saying stuff like that instilled this kind of anxiety I have towards men, which seems completely contradicting to what I just said, because I'm like, oh, I would like, not that I want the attention, but it's like, oh, like, come on, let's do it. But I think that in a way, I'm very trusting and distrusting of men at the same time. And again, I think that has to do with abandonment. I don't have that kind of anxiety and uncertainty at all with females. And even growing up, I always preferred to, I think, have male friends over female friends, because I had female cousins, I had aunts, I had my mom, my grandmothers are all in my life. So for me, I wasn't craving that affection from a woman or a female friend. I had them, but it wasn't something that I always went out of my way and kind of like sought out. But yeah, so in terms of my anxiety, it's chronic. It's something that I still deal with to this day. And with my anxiety, I also have a learning difference. Some people call them learning disabilities. I'm trying to use different language. I have executive functioning. And basically, it makes it rather difficult for me to stay organized, to really just kind of compartmentalize things in my mind, right? So here is I have a large trauma such as abandonment, and then dealing with anxiety. If anyone knows what it's like having an anxiety attack or just chronic anxiety, it's constant like go, 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 go in your head, right? And so that in itself is like difficult to even want to compartmentalize in your head, never mind in the real world, right? So people always say, if you're having, a hard time, it usually reflects in your space, whether it be your room, your apartment, your house. Please excuse the 2 screaming children banging on my door right now. And then executive functioning, where literally my brain cannot function in the way that, you know, it should do the right thing, and it doesn't. But, you know, right now it feels like I'm talking down on myself a lot, right? So, in terms of my abandonment, at 16, I reconnected with my father. And let me mention that I had a dad growing up, though he's not my biological father. I mean, technically speaking, he's a step parent, but he adopted me when I was 9. So I took his last name, so I have his last name. That's my dad. But I just want to put it out there, like, I had a really amazing dad, but I think because of my trauma with the abandonment, I wasn't able to really connect with him, as well as so, like I was saying, like, I had my dad. He was my dad. He was amazing. I think I just struggled to connect with him for a lot of reasons. You know, he was around from a really young age, where he, you know, really, if people respected the situation a little bit better, I could have went my entire life believing that that was my dad, my biological father, and there would be no, you know, questioning it. And I think there was a lot of factors that played in me not really feeling that way. But that's kind of a little bit farther off topic than kind of the path I'm staying on. So in regard to, you know, where I am today, like I mentioned, my dad and I reconnected when I was 16, and that was 5 years ago. And from then to now, it was really good in the beginning. Like, we were really keeping a lot of communication, you know, seeing each other very often. And over the course of the last few years, it stopped, and it was turning into seeing him a little bit less and less, and then no communication. And he has a family. He has a wife and 2 daughters. Biologically, those children are not his, but they are his wives. But much like myself, my dad person, you know, stepped in, and, you know, he stepped in for them. And you could imagine when I, you know, was kind of processing that, like, you stepped in and raised somebody else's children, but you couldn't, like, do that for me. And I hung on to that for a really long time, you know. And I never felt any kind of resentment towards the girls or anything, because that wasn't a choice that they made, you know. These were adult decisions. It wasn't something that any way, shape, or form had to do with them. So, you know, I always empathized with them and understood what it felt like not to always kind of feel like, yeah, might not, you know, fit in. You know, if they had ever shared that with me. And so, up until like a few weeks ago, I hadn't seen my dad in several months. I saw him in the end of January, and I didn't see him again until November. 2020 has been a crazy year for a ton of reasons, but, you know, I kind of gave him this ultimatum. Not that, you know, it was, no, I mean, it basically was just telling him, like, look, if you want to be a part of my life, I need you to kind of step it up, because I'm the child here, and I've done what a child can do. I've reached out to you. I've, you know, made efforts to just be a part of your life as much as I can, and you're not reciprocating that, and I am burnt out. I have so many other things that I could be dealing with, but having the overbearing, you know, control that I was giving him as my abuser, I couldn't take it anymore. And for me, I had to make a decision, and it was difficult, you know, because how do we confront our traumas? Part of me wants to be this little daddy's girl that I never got to be growing up. But then another part of me really had to be realistic with myself and had to kind of shake that off. And I'm not that I can have a good relationship with my dad, but we're past that, and I don't think that we unfortunately will ever have that kind of relationship, which I'm okay with. Not for any bad reason, but that's just the dynamic of the relationship that I have. And so now we do speak a lot more. And for me, when we had our conversation a few weeks ago, it was very empowering because not only was he very intuitive to the things that I was saying, it wasn't a rushed conversation. He actually initiated the conversation. He knew that there was something going on between us, and that took a lot for both of us to kind of just sit down and have that conversation, and for him to own up to the things that really were bothersome to me was even more powerful. And I just kind of have to, not that I'm making excuses for him, but I have to remind myself that he's not gonna always be a 10 out of 10. He is very much so human. Do I have to hold him to a higher standard, level of accountability? Absolutely, because you have to, in any relationship, earn that respect and that trust. And obviously when your parents are the ones raising you, that happens throughout your childhood, and when that is taken away when you're young, if you're lucky, the opportunity to just rebuild and rekindle that. And obviously it's only been a few weeks, so I think that conversation freed me up a little bit in terms of that feeling of abandonment, that feeling of trauma that came through that, because I even share with him, the part about conveying the message of feeling worthless at this young age, and kind of just giving him a quick kind of what is it, like a spark notes almost on my life over the last, over the years that he missed, over the time that he was gone. Even if it was during 17, 18, 19, he wasn't always present for everything. And it's very recently that I'm just starting to kind of be okay with things how they are, because I feel like after that sit down, everything's out on the table. There's nothing really that I'm holding in that I feel is me putting energy, and it's literally just like, here are all my goodies, and I know it might be a lot, but I have nothing more to hold on to this or keep this relationship binding me the way it is if you decide not to make the efforts to have that healthy relationship, right? And right now I'm in a very kind of calm and just relearning myself moment in my life, so I can't decide whether in my next relationship what that will look like, because being abandoned at a young age is hard. And to that point, my mom was abandoned very young, by her own mom, and that definitely it made things difficult growing up in terms of my mom's own relationships with people, and just kind of the way that she functioned. That, I mean, of course, so who wouldn't be kind of like messed up, like one day your mom is gone, literally. And I definitely feel like, yes, it made it a little bit easier to have a parent that knows what that feels like, the abandonment issue. Um, but it didn't make it any easier. Um, and in terms of my anxiety, it's still very real, especially now more than ever with, you know, COVID and school and just a lot of familial issues going on right now for me that is also triggering some, you know, things in me. Um, so I, and of course, my learning disability, executive functioning, I still struggle with math and English, even as a college student. In terms of just staying organized, I definitely was given a lot of resources throughout my K-12 experience. So I don't think that that is something that controls me. It makes things a little bit more difficult, you know, but I think that I don't allow something like that to box me in or define me or anything. It's just kind of, you know, a part of me like anything else. Oh, you know, not with the curly hair, not with the learning difference. Like, you know, that's something that I had to, from a really young age, learn to just claim and make it my own. Because for me, I you know, I didn't see it make, you know, how it would make me any difference, except that maybe it just takes me a little bit longer to learn something that another person might not learn in the same amount of time as I do, you know, and less time. So I definitely have like taken that by the balls and like did what I had to do, you know. I still sometimes struggle with organization, or if something is like, you know, a room full of stuff and it's like all over the place. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, just stuff like that. But and it's nothing that I feel affects me in a way where I notice it. And sometimes it could be like anxiety provoked, or, you know, things that are natural. It's hard to sometimes see in your, you know, real world, especially just trying to navigate it now as an adult. Um, you know, it's something that is there. It's like a part of my little personal resume. It's there, but it doesn't define me. It's just an experience that I have that, you know, not everybody gets to have. And, you know, anxiety. I definitely, I struggle with this though. I do. I really do. I still struggle with it. You can see it in my nails. My nails used to be a lot worse, but I struggle with it in my nails. I struggle with it in my eyebrows. Right now, you could see it in my room. My room's a little bit more disorganized than I would usually like to keep it, and just the sensation of feeling overwhelmed always. It's just where I'm at right now, and it's scary that you, for at least for me, I've gotten used to living with anxiety for so many years, where the same way that someone feels happiness and sadness in a day, you know, like anxiety is literally just like a emotion, and, you know, it's not really related necessarily to any one thing. You know, for me, you know, I don't have a specific trigger to anything that could be anxiety provoking. But I would say I now more than ever, my anxiety makes me super irritable, you know, super moody, in the sense that, you know, it can be hard for me to deal with people. And currently I am dealing with depression. As much as I am struggling to admit to that, because who wants to admit that they're depressed? You know, I can give you 101 other reasons why I'm anything but depressed. But it still doesn't change the fact that this is something that I'm going through. And even though I am that kid that goes to the gym and eats well, you know, that doesn't take away anything from it. And it's hard because you want to feel in control of your own life as much as possible, but you just can't sometimes. And that's okay, because like all things, I know it's an emotion, and you know, it won't stay forever. But I think between some really heavy familial things and just seasonal depression, there's a lot of things that are kind of factoring and, you know, are up against me. But I'm very lucky that I have a family, though they are very traditional in many senses, that does support caring for your mental health. I'm not going to say all parts of my family understands and supports it, but it's something that on every level is something that is acknowledged and respected. Even if that family member doesn't understand it.